There we go. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Cathryn. Cathryn Vogeley grew up in a very strict Catholic family. She was the middle child of 5 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania during the 1950s. When she found herself pregnant at 18, her boyfriend wasn't interested in getting married, and her parents were mortified. Like many birth mothers of that era, she was sent off to an unwed mother's home and relinquished in a closed adoption. She was ordered to put it behind her and to forget, which of course she never did. She went on to earn advanced degrees as a nurse specialist, partially here in Cleveland at the Cleveland Clinic, and had quite a illustrious career as a wound ostomy specialist. After retiring in 2014, Cathryn recognized the symptoms of PTSD and sought help specifically in that area. While she was improving, she took up writing as a hobby, which led her to this talk this evening. She published her memoir called I Need to Tell You about a year ago in May 2022, and it is here. So Cathryn lives in the Pacific Northwest, where she lives with her husband and her 3 terriers. And I will be putting Cathryn's website in the chat as well, so you can learn more about her that way. And with that, we'll give it to Cathryn. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. It's wonderful to see you. I want to say right off that part of huge part of overcoming my shame is being able to talk to people like you. Because most of my life, I did not talk about it. Most of my life, I lived with it alone, feeling different, feeling like nobody understood. When I first was pregnant, being 1968 in Pittsburgh, Catholic, to be a good wife for your husband was to be a virgin. That was stressed over and over by my mother as well as the Catholic Church. And so I was having sex with my boyfriend, always in the car, oftentimes crying, worrying about getting pregnant. And after 2 years, I did get pregnant and I wanted to die. I was so mortified. I think mostly because I didn't want to tell my mother. To think of having to go in front of my mother, not to mention my father, and say I'm pregnant meant that they knew what I had done, and I just couldn't stand that. So fast forward to, he didn't want to get married, and now I'm abandoned, and my parents had 5 children. My little sister was 11, and the youngest. And I think that my mother was probably horrified that they might have to raise yet another child. She never said that to me, but in my stage now of life, I look back and I think that had to have something to do with it. But even more so, I think it was what people would think, because at that time, nobody in my world had a baby outside of marriage and kept the child. And so everybody I knew who got pregnant and wasn't married, got married. Shotgun weddings. Obviously, other people did get pregnant. They went away, kept it a secret, just like I did. Nobody knew. Even my siblings didn't know that I was pregnant. I made up a lie and said, I dropped out of nursing school after my first year. And I said, to my sister, who was just a year and a half older than me, I didn't know if I wanted to be a nurse. And I wanted to move out of state and see what the world was like. I went to Ohio from Pittsburgh. I wanted to see what the world was like. And I said that I worked for a dentist. Who knows why I made that up? I was so ridiculous, but that's what I said, something related to the healthcare field. And my sister said, what are you talking about? If you want to know what the world is like, you don't have to leave the state to find that out. Just move out. Just, live, get your own place. And so I had to work, I was pregnant. So I had to work hard at convincing her that this is what I wanted to do. So all that is to say, it was a very secret thing that I was going through. Very, very shameful. I didn't want anybody to know. Certainly my parents reinforced that. And so I went to Ohio for a month and a half because the Home for Unwed Mothers, Rosalia in Pittsburgh, wouldn't take girls until they were 7 months pregnant. So I had to have a place to hide out until then. Then at 7 months, I went back to Pittsburgh to Rosalia, which is a Catholic Charities home for unwed mothers, where secrecy is everything. They change your name. My name was Jane, and I thought that was stupid. So I told everybody my name was Kathy. I wasn't going to go with Jane. I mean, they didn't know my last name, so what do I care? And they're in the same situation. So what did I care? So had the baby was put up for adoption, if you pardon me for using that language, in a closed adoption. So the records were sealed for 99 years. And when I went back home, my mother never visited me. She didn't call me while I was pregnant. So that reinforced the shame. So I go home and she doesn't talk about the baby. She says, just forget about it. Just move forward. It's not going to do you any good to talk about it. Just forget about it. And so we didn't talk about it. The baby was never mentioned. So I recovered. I switched nursing schools. I went to a different school. Meanwhile, the people that I was friends with in my first year of nursing school didn't know what happened to me because I didn't tell anybody. I just left. And so I started in a new nursing school, and the girls from my first school wanted to get together with me after the baby was born, et cetera. And I thought, yeah, cool. Get together with them and just say hi, catch up. I mean, I've been in Ohio, according to what everybody else knew. And we were all sitting together, a bunch of us, and I wanted to know how their year went, et cetera. And one of them said, Kathy, we know. I was like, oh my God. I didn't say anything. I just stunned, breathless. And I said, what? And I thought they meant that they knew that I had changed nursing schools, that I did want to be a nurse, but for some reason I changed. And I was scrambling to figure out a new lie to tell them when one of them said, we know you had a baby. Your cousin told us, your cousin who was a priest came in and told us that the labor was over and everything was okay. Well, talk about wanting to die. So I couldn't wait to get out of there. And I never saw any of them or talked to any of them again. I was just so mortified and ashamed. Which is, at my age, looking back, it's just so painful that I couldn't have admitted to them that this is what I went through and processed it with them. But I didn't. I changed the subject and I wanted to talk about them. So then in my new nursing school, I made a good friend, and eventually I told her. Her name was Cheryl. I said, I have something to tell you. And she said, okay. And I think I had known her for a year or so. And I said, I had a baby and I wasn't married, or I had a baby and I had to give her away. I had to put her up for adoption. And her reaction, I mean, this was huge for me to say this out loud. And her reaction was silence. She said, oh, she didn't know what to say. We were the same age. She said, that must have been hard. I mean, she was a very compassionate young woman, but she didn't know what to say. And I didn't know what to say after that. And it was just kind of like a bubble that just, a soap bubble that just popped, just went away. And it was huge for me to say that out loud. And I have to say, very unsatisfying in her response. And yet looking back, I don't know what I expected. So then I met my husband, the man who became my husband, and I told him pretty quickly that I had had a baby. And he said, well, where is she? And I said, I don't know. And I, told him about it. And he said, okay, change the subject. So that's kind of how it went through my life. Anytime I was really close to somebody, I would disclose. It was like I had this thing in me that was so powerful that it just wanted out, and I just needed somebody. I think, I didn't know at the time, but I think I needed somebody to tell me they loved me, that I was good, that I was okay, that I was enough, and that they were sorry that this happened and let me talk about it. But nobody did that. And I don't fault them for it. They're not counselors or therapists. They don't know what to say. So I had, my husband, 2 children, beautiful girls, loved them so much, really threw myself into being a wife and a mother. And by the way, I got married as fast as I could to anybody. I didn't care who it was. I just wanted to be a wife and be a mother. And that's what I did. And I was 37. My kids were young teenagers. I had to have a hysterectomy because I had severe endometriosis. And it was after that that my depression really blossomed. And if that's not a good word to say about depression, but pulled me down, let's say that. My daughters were starting to individuate, which children need to do. Healthy children do that. And it's, teenagers are difficult. I wasn't their first love anymore. They were into each other, and they laughed at me, and I was on the outside, and it just added to my depression. I became very depressed, and I just wanted to be gone. It's funny because depression or suicide sometimes is thought to be an expression of anger. And whether I was angry or not, I didn't feel that way. I was just so ashamed and so I just felt wrong. I hated myself. I wanted to be out of there. I wanted to be never have lived. And so I took a pistol from my husband's closet. And I sat down and looked at it, held it, and thought about disappearing. And then I thought of my children and how they were at school and how they would come home from school and find me. And I thought, I can never do that to them. So I put the gun away and I decided after that, all right, that's enough. I have to get a hold of myself and something's got to change. And so after that, things did change. I made a lot of changes in my life. Took me a couple of years. But in that time, I lost 20 pounds. I enrolled in college because I didn't have a college degree. I had a nursing diploma as an RN. And I started to feel better about myself. Not that my having had a child and giving her up was part of that. But I busied myself. I became very busy and very focused on myself. I would say selfish. My kids were doing their own thing. We were, I was still with my husband. We attended their high school events, etc. And I just started to grow myself. Started to, I think, find myself. That young girl at 17, 18 who got pregnant, who was left behind. When my daughter got to be 17, I said, you can't be 17. I said this more than once. You can't be 17. I'm 17. And I truly was stuck in that period of being 17. I didn't consider it odd at the time, but looking back, it was evidence of how I was stuck in that time. So I threw myself, kept busy, threw myself into my professional life. I eventually met my husband, who is a wonderful, wonderful, loving, giving person who is all about me. He does everything for me. He's always there for me. And I started to relax. I stopped trying to I was always trying to make someone love me. I went through a lot of men trying to make them love me. And each one, there were 3, each one I told them before we slept together that I had a child and gave her up for adoption. And it strikes me now as odd that would, every time that would come up. And every time the response was the same. So I got married to my second husband, loved him dearly. He loved me. I was working at the VA as a wound ostomy specialist. I was running the wound clinic, and something happened at home where I had a panic attack, and I'm not like that. I don't panic. I'm a nurse. I'm pretty well controlled, and I just was like, what the heck? What's going on with me? So from there, other things happened to tell me that something's not right with me. Nightmares, irritability, jumpiness, drinking too much. And I went to a talk, this is at the VA, a talk on PTSD. I always thought that PTSD was something that military people had. And as the lecturer described the symptoms, I'm sitting there thinking, that's me. She's describing me. I have everything of that. And so my heart's pounding and I'm thinking, dear me, what in the world? So I went up to her afterwards and I talked to her and told her that I relate to this. I said, I can't explain it. I don't understand it, but I think I need to talk to somebody. And so she and I started. She agreed to see me, and the first thing I said when I went into her was, firstly, I was terribly embarrassed. I was a professional. I worked in the same hospital system as she did. And here I am. It's like, I'm just so embarrassed. I don't really want to do this. And I mean, I'm embarrassed not that I had a baby and gave her away, but that I'm in need of talking to a therapist. So I sat down and I said, she said, what can I do for you? And I said, I really don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't even know what to talk about. And she said, well, okay, why don't you tell me about yourself? And I said, I took a deep breath and I said, well, I guess you should know that I had a baby when I was 19 and I wasn't married and I had to put her up for adoption. But that's in the past, it's all over with. It doesn't matter anymore. And she said, okay. And so then I started talking about my parents and my childhood and, a lot of tears and a lot of processing about that. And so, we kept talking and, at the end, do you want to come back? And me, all upset and saying, I think I need to. And all of this was about my childhood. And so I went to her several times. And after, I don't know, a month or so, I was in my clinic and my clinic, the way I worked with patients was I could kind of estimate about how long it would take their wound to heal. And I figured, whatever was going on with me, I still didn't know. And I sent her an email and I said, because I was paying out of pocket, it was $80 an hour. And I said, I'm just wondering, I'm really glad that you're seeing me. And I'm just curious about what you think on the timeline. If you think it'll be about 6 weeks or so till I'll be done. she emailed me back and said, there's no way to tell. And I wasn't talking about the baby yet. She said, there's no way to predict how long you'll be in therapy. And I was like, okay. All right. So 2 years later, I'm still seeing her and I'm feeling better, a lot better. And I don't know why this happened. I just cannot explain it. But I was feeling better. I had a session finally when I didn't cry. And I said to her, I want to write. And she said, she happened to be a professor of literature. And she said, okay, go to the attic. The attic is a place in Portland, Oregon, where there are a lot of writers. It's not university affiliated, but it's for people like me who are not writers, but want to learn to write. So I said, okay. So I enrolled, and the first story I wrote was about being on a roller coaster at Kennywood and my mother teaching me to scream. And Jennifer Lauck was my teacher. If anybody has read anything by Jennifer Lauck, she has published, I think, 6 books. The first one called Blackbird, a bestseller on the New York Times list. She was on Oprah, etc. And she's very direct. And she said to me, you know, there's 12 of us in the class, and she said, really, Cathryn, is this what you want to write about? Well, heck, I didn't know what I wanted to write about. And I said, I don't know. So at the end of the class, for some reason, I guess she was talking about her book. She had been adopted and was traumatized as a youngster. And she was talking about the primal wound and being ripped from your mother's arms. And go figure, you know, there's 12 of us in this class. There are probably 4 or 5 men. Most of us are older. The different students are, you know, their topics and their intentions are all different. Jennifer just happens to be this author who wrote this book. I didn't care who she was. I signed up for her course because it was called The Bones of Storytelling, and it was geared for new writers. But here she was saying this about being a newborn baby and being ripped from your mother's arms. And as she went on, I started feeling this pressure in my neck and my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. The class was over, people were leaving, and I said to her, I need to talk to you. And she said, okay, go ahead. And I said, not here. And she said, oh, okay. So she took me across the hall to a room, and I closed the door, and she said, oh. So we sat down, and she said, what? And I said, I just burst out crying, and I couldn't talk. And she said, oh, were you adopted? And I went like this. I was crying so hard. And she said, oh, did you adopt a child? And I was crying, shaking my head. And she said, oh, are you a birth mother? Oh, yes, you know. So that's kind of how it started, processing my shame. I thought when I was finished, or no, I wasn't. I was still in therapy at the time. But I was on the last couple of months. But I thought that I was, quote unquote, better. I thought that I was, quote unquote, healed. And she said to me, Cathryn, this is what you must write about. This is where your pain is. Well, this was not a subject I talked about. I mean, you can see from how I said, I need to talk to you. I went into a separate room, etc. I said, I can't. She said, you have to. And so we went back and forth. She said, you think about it, but this is your topic. All right. So I went home, and whatever the assignment was, I did that. And little by little, I started telling my story. Sometimes in class, every week, somebody got the chance to read their work. And you would pass out your pages, and everybody would critique. And sometimes I wasn't the only one crying at the table. And it was killing me, number one, to cry in front of people. I didn't cry every time, but once or twice I did. I wanted to die. It was embarrassing for me. I didn't like it. I don't like being vulnerable. And we would take a break about every hour. And in that class of 12, 2 people told me in confidence that they too had given up a baby. And they said, nobody knows about it. And I've discovered that there are a whole lot of me. And the statistics are real gray, but I think there are millions of people like me who went through what I did and are so ashamed and are so painful and heartbroken that they can't talk about it, and won't talk about it. They have closed the door, and that's that. They're not talking about it. They don't want to meet their child. They don't want to process, etc. And I think that that's, what do I know? But going through what I've gone through, I think it's because of shame. So eventually, it took me a couple of years because I had to learn how to write. Eventually, I had a book to publish. And when somebody said to me, this is a book, you need to start sending it out. And I said all along the way, this is shit. I'm a nurse. I'm not a writer. You know, my writing is awful, and etc. Well, eventually I went through many editors, and eventually it got to the point where I thought, it's not that bad. So it was published. I feel good about the book. And here is where my healing really started. It's like all the rest of it was planting the bulb in the ground. And finally it's coming up. And now I've got a bud and it's blooming. Is when the book was published and I started trying. My publisher is very small. They don't have a marketing program. So the author has to do all the marketing themselves. And I joined a lot of groups on Facebook. I'm not a social media person. And really, social media was my best vehicle for getting my word out. I was invited to the Concerned United Birth Parents retreat in Tampa last year. And so I took some books and I went there. And I want to tell you, it was, I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could be with people who would be crying all the time, who would be talking about this difficult subject. I hadn't talked about it for all of my life. And so the invitation was, we can't pay you, but we can't pay your way, but we really want you to read part of your book and we want to hear what you have to say. So deep breath, a lot of anxiety. I went, and I want to tell you, it was, for me, because I was new, was very difficult. But it was also amazingly healing. These were people who went through what I went through, or people who were much younger than me, who were going through not a closed adoption, but the trauma of losing a child to adoption. These were people who understood what I was saying. These were people who cried with me. And so for the first time in my life, since 1969, I had somebody, lots of people who knew, who understood. And that was just amazing. The people on Facebook, there are, I don't know, I've probably joined 20 groups. about adoption and first mothers. And there's a lot of discussion that is hard for me to read about. There are a lot of angry people out there, a lot of angry adoptees, a lot of resentful first mothers. And so there are opinions about language, etc., all over the place. But it's been incredibly healing for me to be able to talk about it. There are Zoom meetings like this one, NAAP, National Association of Adoptees and Parents, sorry, .org, NAAP.org. They have Zoom meetings every week, sometimes more than that. They have presenters, etc. And the CUB, the Cub group, there are a lot of resources that once I started talking about and writing about, communicating with other people about my story, that's when my flower started to bloom. That's when I started to heal. I took some notes because I wanted to tell you certain things. I asked on one of the sites for adoptees, I said, do you feel shame as an adoptee? Because my daughter, when I found her, we never met and we haven't spoken, but we emailed for a while, and she said that she was ashamed, and I was shocked, just blown away, because I thought that she would be special, that she would feel chosen, she would be the center of attention, which I was never in my family of 5. And I wanted to understand more about the adoptee's experience. And so I put it out there, and I just wanted to read for you a couple of things that statements that people made, just short clips. One thing was somebody wrote, "Everybody knows that you're adopted. You were a mistake. Bio children in the adoptive family treated with adoration, and the adoptee is treated like an outsider." Another person said, "When I was a kid, I held tight to the special chosen baby narrative." So it was other children who first called me bastard, and infuriated my mom so much that she asked my brother and I to keep our adoptedness to ourselves. And after that, confusion, because if I was so special, why can't we talk about it? Another person said, "Shame for hurting my adoptive parents when I found my first mother." Another person said, "Feeling not good enough." Another person said, "Trying to figure out what's wrong with me." Somebody asked this person, "What's it like to be adopted?" And there are some commonalities, and I heard from adoptees who read my book saying, whether it's a first mother or an adoptee, everyone else was wanted. That's the adoptee talking. Or the first mother, everyone else you knew got married, who got pregnant, got married. And so there was us who were not good enough to marry. Adoptees and first mothers feeling different and feeling shame. Ever since I had my baby, I felt like an outsider. I never fit in. I had this big hump on my back. That's how I felt. Adoptees and first mothers feel embarrassed that we embarrassed our family. We embarrassed our parents, and then not fitting in. So I could say more. Betsy, do you want me to keep going or do you want me to stop?
Let's break for some question and answer.
Okay.
And we just have a couple questions so far, and so there's not more you can continue, but we did have one question pretty early on when you were speaking. This particular person has had a good reunion with her mother, and her mother had been told that it would be easier if she didn't see her baby or hear her cry. So her baby was immediately taken away. And I know you address this in your book, Cathryn. But this adoptee later found out that her mother's mother came and held her before she was placed for adoption. So her question was, why would the birth mother's mother come and do that? I don't know if you have an answer or not, but
I don't. I can't speak for her, but you know, most of my life, my own mother didn't. I mean, she died at 56, so she didn't talk about my pregnancy or my baby, and I, you know, she told me to forget about it, etc. But as an older woman now, and having written my memoir and thinking about what was it like for her, and thinking, I mean, she was a loving mother. She must have gone through tremendous conflict, although she never told me that. She had 5 children. To think of giving away your baby, I would imagine I could see myself as a mother of maybe my daughter who was putting up her child, giving up her child for adoption, that it would kill me as the grandmother. It would just kill me. And I think that, well, I don't know. Maybe she was conflicted, and to be able to hold her grandchild was the most that she could do. And in that case, I feel bad that she couldn't say, I want this baby, I will raise this baby. Everybody's situation is different.
thank you. Also, having been a nurse, and I didn't work in OBGYN, but I've watched the trends around infant loss with stillbirths, and they've moved toward women, couples holding their infant and grieving their loss in a much more tangible way than used to be accepted. And so it's interesting that that was such a going school of thought for mothers that were placing children for adoption. My own birth mother was offered to dress me and hand me over as if I was going to my adoptive home. They gave her a choice of white, yellow, or green, and had a whole ritual around her dressing me to leave. And there's pictures of it. She actually has pictures of it that she's given me. So I had a comment, Cathryn. You mentioned that there's not hard statistics, but there must be millions of women like you out there. And I can reinforce that, yes, there are. There's, one of the things I tell people often is there's a birth mother, there's 2 birth parents out there for every adopted person. So many of us, even outside the adoption community, can name adopted people that we happen to know in our life and our circles. Many people can name adopted parents that they know in their life and in their circles, but very few people can name birth parents. But there's obviously
interesting, isn't it?
And people realize, and you're getting supportive comments about your participation in Cub and coming to the Adoption Network Birth Mothers Group, etc. Somebody wants to know the name of your book, so I didn't do a very good job introducing you. I don't know that I named it. So do you want to talk a little bit about your book?
Yeah, thank you. It's called I Need to Tell You. And it's funny because people ask me what's the name of my book, and I'll say it's I Need to Tell You. And they'll say, okay, tell me. It's called I Need to Tell You. And it's by Cathryn Vogeley. You can get it anywhere. You can get it on, what is it, bookshop.org, I think it's called, which is an independent site. You can get it on Amazon, of course. I have it out in Kindle, paper copy, and Audible. If you want a signed copy, you can contact me and I'll mail you a signed copy. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Cathryn?
Cathryn, I have a question for you. And first of all, I really appreciated the talk this evening and the candor and the heartfelt, the way you have shared your story. My question might sound a little bit odd, but I'm curious on your two daughters, so daughter number 2 and 3 that you raised.
Yes.
When and how did you share with them your story, as the title of your book is I Need to Tell You? So my own mother, and I'm one of 3 kids, and now 4 that we found out later in life. This came out after I turned 50 years old. So was buried, and I think I Need to Tell You was something that my mom struggled with, probably, I know she struggled with it her whole life. So just in bringing that story to fruition, luckily her daughter found her and the story came out, but it was buried so deep and so many years. But then there's been a lot of emotions through why didn't you tell us this sooner?
Yeah.
That we had a sister, who, by the way, the very positive part of this, just to share with you, is I always say new sister in a very fond, joking way. We've known each other now for let's see, 4 years now, and gonna be happier that we have her in our lives.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And
Congratulations. Good for you and good for her and for your mother. Everybody's situation is different. I think that my pain was close to my surface, even though I wouldn't talk about it. When I went through what I call my metamorphosis, when I decided to live, I went through a lot of changes. I think my oldest daughter that I raised was in college. My youngest daughter had graduated, I believe. She might have been in college too. And they were both home. I believe I was divorced. And I just wanted to tell them. Because they were old enough now to hear it. I sat them down and it's one of those flashbulb moments that I'll never forget. I sat across from them. They were all threatened because I said, I want to tell you something, and had them sit down, and I told them I had a baby when I was 19 that I couldn't keep, and she was adopted, and it was all secret, and the records are sealed for 99 years. And they both sat there for a second and said, what? You had a baby and you gave her away? And I said yes, and it's how things were at the time. And then the next thing one of them said was, does Dad know about this? And I said, yes, he knows. Well, what does he say? I said, well, I told him shortly after we met, and he said, she's not in your life, and okay. So that was that. Oh, they said, well, what about us? What about us? And I said, nothing changes at all. And the other question was, so where is she? But this attitude of I don't know, resentment was right out of the gate. I said, I don't know where she is. I'll never meet her, etc. And then as I found her, so I found her just a few years ago. So my kids are middle-aged. Nobody, I have a big family. I have 4 siblings. Nobody in my family, not my daughters, not my siblings, nobody has wanted to reach out to her. And it really hurts me. But my daughter, who I found, doesn't want to be a part of my life. And I think that's part of why my siblings and my daughters don't want to reach out. My youngest daughter is open, and she said, what would I say to her, Mom? What would I say? Would I say, I got her and you didn't? And I thought, there's so much about this I don't understand or predict or know. But that was an insight for me that I didn't have. So Sharon, did you feel that way? Did you feel like, what would you say to her?
Yeah, as you said, every person's story is different. Everyone has a different perspective. So growing up of one of 3 girls, each of the 3 of us had a different perspective upon that light bulb moment sitting across from the table when we were told. For me, it just explained a lot about who my mom was. She was the biggest proponent of pro-life, proponent of birth control. She too came close to committing suicide, but doing it with all of us in the car. And when we were a young age, and she had that, like, I turn around moment, and but she struggled her whole life with depression.
Yeah.
And today with alcoholism. So I don't think that she's had the healing that you have had through your writing. So it's wonderful to hear your journey. I forget the question you asked me, but how did I feel? I just accepted. I was more I accepted right away, and then I wanted to meet her. So immediately, with her information, I was the one that texted her and said, we want to meet. And 24 hours later, she drove 8 hours and we were all in the same house together. So that was 2018. And then COVID hit and we all live in different parts of the country. But we now have Sisters Weekend, which we never had with my 3 sisters, the 3 of us. Now that we have 4th sister, we have had now 2 Sisters Weekends annually. And I would say my sisters are the most important thing. And couldn't be happier that we have found her, and praying that we can let go of the resentment that is felt and the hurt because we've had 50 years of our lives without her, that we wish we would have had more of her.
Yeah. Thank you. I wanted to say real quick, I know we're out of time, but Kelly Layton.
We have 2 people that have questions I want to get to too.
Oh, I was just going to say, for those 2 people, if you have to cut off, my email is cathrynvogeley@gmail.com if you want to connect with me.
Thank you. Let's do the 2 questions. And if anybody does need to depart at 9, we understand, but I'm happy to run a few minutes over to get those questions answered. So Loretta, I think you were first.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I can relate to a lot. I wanted to know, you talked about there's Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
The NAAP.org.
Right.
Okay. And was there another one too? What was the?
Actually-
Adoption Network has Zoom meetings, and I put the link in the chat. And then NAAP has Zoom meetings as well.
Yeah, yeah, I learn
and
about
Cub.
these through Facebook. Yeah, and it's just great to be able to talk to people, hear people's stories.
Okay,
So
but
some are specific to one population, others are open to anyone.
Yeah,
You can check out different ones.
okay, very good. Thank you.
Thanks.
well,
We'll have them in, we usually do a follow-up email when the recording for this is available, and we'll have a link to at least to ours in that email. And I'd be happy to direct you to the others afterwards too. Kelly?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
mhm.
Oh, okay, great. It's more of a comment. I was just reflecting on the situation with your daughter who was put up for adoption, and how how you mentioned that your relatives don't want to have anything to do with her. You think because I guess because she doesn't want a relationship with you. Well, I just wanted to comment that I have a very unique reunion situation in that I am not in reunion with my birth mother, although I have met her once. But I am in reunion with a bunch of cousins and aunts and uncles, and even my biological grandmother, who is still alive in her late 80s. And that is the mother of my mother. So even though I choose not to have a relationship with my mother, I am in reunion with all these people. So I would just say, as a word of like encouragement to your family members, that them not wanting to have a relationship with your daughter who is relinquished doesn't is a kind of secondary rejection. And I think that just because an adoptee doesn't necessarily want a relationship with their parent, which can be viewed as a very intense relationship, does not necessarily mean they don't want a relationship with other family members. So I would just say, it just makes me sad to hear that your other family members don't want a relationship with her, because I think, as adoptees, we've already faced the biggest rejection in our lives by losing,
Yeah.
our families of origin. So I think we need to be shown the most grace, of all, because meeting with that rejection in the future, when we may want a relationship with some, but not all biological family members, is very hard for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm friends with her daughter on Instagram. She just graduated from Auburn University, and she hasn't blocked me. So every now and then, I don't make comments, but every now and then when she posts something, I put a heart, and I have thought about reaching out to her and saying, would you mind being in touch with me? But I'm afraid her mother, my daughter, will be offended or something and block that.
Well, I would just say to that your daughter does not control her daughter's Facebook account, right? So, and her
Mhm.
daughter is an adult, so she can make her own
Yeah.
decision. Yeah.
That's true. Thank you, Kelly.
Yep.
Well, thank you, everybody. Good discussion. I wish we had more time, but Cathryn, thanks for sharing your email, and I'm sure that some people will be reaching out to you. You will be getting a follow-up email from this evening's presentation. Typically, I put a quick survey in the chat, but I'm realizing I think the link I have in front of me in my notes isn't the right one. So please do give us your feedback when you get that follow-up email. That's always helpful to us. Thank you, Cathryn, for volunteering your time to spend the evening with us and sharing so much. And as many of you know, Adoption Network Cleveland is a nonprofit organization that serves individuals and families that are impacted by adoption, kinship, and foster care. And we thrive because of the community's support. So if you're interested in joining, you can take a look at our website, which is adoptionnetwork.org. We do have another program next week on Monday evening. We have several support meetings in between on our website, so you can check those out as well. And thank you for coming. I'll put that link in the chat one more time, but very much enjoyed having all of you here this evening.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.
Cathryn, if you want to stay on a second.